Welcome to the Nilgiri-class frigate ship brief. Let's get started here. So this is Project 17 Alpha, Alpha being a modernization change that they made to the Nilgiri-class. This is a indigenous design and construction in India. The primary change on this ship is stealth. They've increased a lot of systems, sensor capability, weapon capability, but they really wanted to focus on stealth because in the 21st century, if you can't see your target, you can't hit it with these remote systems. So it's a follow-on project from the 17th, Project 17, which is the Shivalik class, if I'm saying that, or Shivalik class. It's 6 meters longer than its predecessor. Like I said, it has the improved sensors and stuff. And what we'll talk about in detail is a lot of the weapon systems. That has an 8-cell VLS for the BrahMos PJ-10 ramjet supersonic cruise missile. And this thing is quite impressive. It is a similar, it's based off a Russian design, but again, it's all indigenous. This is built by India for Indian ships. It does have a 32-cell VLS launcher for the Barak long-range missiles or the Barak 8 SAM, surface-to-air missiles, which can be medium range. So, and those are going to be divided up fore and aft, 16 forward, 16 aft. You'll see that here in a second. They're going to build 7 of these, and they've already begun construction on 6. So they are committed to this ship. This is not a program that's going to languish on the design boards, as has happened in previous projects, to be honest with you, with the Indian military. This one they've actually taken action on, and they have 6 under construction right now, and it is a $7 billion project, quite expensive. All right, so let's start here on the bow. You can see they have 2 RBU 6000 ASW rockets. Those are a old Soviet era weapon that has been sold around the world and is used by many navies, and this is the Indian version of that. There's the 8-cell VLS BrahMos supersonic cruise missile launcher right there on the bow, and 2 8-cell VLS Barak 8 SAMs, and these are the relatively short-range surface-to-air missiles. The long-range ones that can reach out to many kilometers are on the aft, and then they have a deck gun, 76 millimeter deck gun there on the bow. It's not a warship if it doesn't have a deck gun, is the old adage. All right, the crown jewel of this ship, besides its stealth design, is this radar, the MF Star, the Elta ELAM-2248. It is a digital ASA radar that we're going to talk about. It's pretty capable. And so not only does she have long-range air defense with that long-range missile, she has good guns, she has supersonic cruise missiles, and long-range detection capability. She has the Shakti electronic warfare suite, and 2x3 torpedo heavyweight torpedo launchers, port and starboard. And she has the Lanza 3D surface surveillance radar, air surveillance radar, very similar to the one that's used by the Royal Navy. All right, so here we have on the sides here, you have the Barak 8 SAMs 2x8 launchers above the helicopter deck, as well as the AK-630 CIWS mounted and decoy Kavish launchers there on the starboard side. You can see the stacks for the 2 LM2500 GTs and the 2 diesel engines. This is a CODAG system that they can run those in conjunction with each other. In other words, they don't need to shift between diesel or gas turbine. They can run both at the same time and get the power of the full train, really pushing this ship through the water quite quickly. Okay, here we have the ship schedule. You can see that they've already laid the keel on all of these ships. They have launched 5 of them. Remember, launched is not commissioned, so they're still adding systems to it. They'll typically launch without any weapon systems on board, and sometimes not even the full mast, as you can see here in the top right picture. And they'll add all those systems after it's in the water. They're built in 2 different shipyards here. Here you can see the one's in Mumbai and one is over in near West Bengal. Building these in conjunction, in parallel, if you will, with each other. Here's the Project 17 Alpha Nilgiri by the numbers. These are the numbers and values you really want to remember to learn about this ship. It has 2 American GE LM2500 gas turbines. These are the same gas turbines we use on our destroyers. It's a very good engine, and that's why it's sold around the world. It also has 2 MAN 12V28 33 diesel engines, 2 shafts. The total tonnage here, when it's fully loaded, is over 6,600 tons, and it can be pushed up to 28 knots. This is the public number. I would expect that number to be closer to 30 knots, to be honest with you, especially with 2 of the LM2500s. Simple math will tell you that this ship should reach 32 to 33 knots when it's at full power. But public number is 28. BrahMos PJ100, that has 8 of those. Those are the supersonic cruise missiles. That's really the punch of this thing. It can reach out and hurt things at very high speeds and very long ranges, and it's got 8 of them. It has a 32-cell VLS, 2 octuple forward and 2 octuple VLSs aft, loaded with 32 Barak long-range and Barak 8 surface-to-air missiles. The surface-to-air missiles don't have necessarily that long range that the Barak LR has, so they're a little bit cheaper, but they also, it's kind of like for point defense. You don't want to spend your expensive long-range missile defending the ship whenever you can use a shorter, faster, a little bit more accurate missile as well for the short range defense. And that's why they have a mix of LR long range missiles and short range, relatively short range. I can't call the Barak 8 a short range missiles because it'll still reach out and get you. The 76 millimeter main gun is on the bow, as we saw, and it has 2 Elbit 12.7 millimeter close-in weapon systems there above the hangar, helicopter hangar. It also has 2 AK-630 CIWS, so a lot of point defense on this. Has 2 by 3 torpedo tubes for lightweight and heavyweight. The heavyweight torpedo is not announced yet, as it says here. Typically, these pneumatic launchers only use lightweight weapons, but India is going all in on this frigate. And if they can push a heavyweight torpedo out of that launcher, good for them, and I'm sure they're going to try and do it. And then they use the American helicopters. They still have the old Sea Kings, keeping those things running. And they also have the MH-60R, which is the modern, seaborne helicopter that we use in our Navy too. We're selling those to India. So India's really got something good here. This is a really complete package. I would argue, because they have the BrahMos supersonic cruise missile, maybe better than even our new frigate that's coming out, the Constellation class. Because although the values here are similar to ours, they have more point defense, more guns, and they also have a supersonic missile that we do not have. We're still using the old Tomahawk. So arguably better than the Constellation class. See, the MF Star radar is amazing. There's not a lot of public numbers on that, but we'll give you what we have here. They also have the Lanza 3D air surveillance radar, which is that billboard looking one. It's rectangle, black in color, looks exactly like the one the Royal Navy uses, like I said. The Shakti electronic warfare suite and the 9 yen Comet Intel system, or commit system. The Bell Humsa bow mounted sonar array. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then, of course, decoy launchers for defenses. So this thing has top of the line sensor suites for offense and defense, countermeasures as well. Here is that gas turbine manufactured by General Electric. This thing is very reliable, very powerful, sold around the world, and General Electric, makes a lot of money selling these. So they always have a good source of income just from this project alone, not to mention all the other projects that General Electric is involved in as well. And here is the MAN 12V28 diesel. Produces 12 megawatts. It's a 12-cylinder 4-stroke engine that you can find idling at a 1,032 RPM. One of the reasons why we give you the RPM is because marine diesels run at 1 RPM when they're running, and then you can throttle the power on the electrical generator side, right? But the reason why we do that is each one of these diesels has a efficient RPM. And so if you deviate from that RPM, you're essentially wasting fuel. And so the whole idea is, you want to get the most out of your limited fuel stores on board. So they'll run it at 1232, which makes it very easy to set your sonar system to look for this thing, right? But that's how they operate. That's how every Navy operates these marine diesels, because you want to get the most endurance out of your limited fuel supply. All right, let's take a look at this MF Star radar. This digital ASA multifunction radar is the newest thing in the Indian Navy, and it's really, really capable. It does have 4 scalable faces, does for active S-band radar, multi-beam and pulse Doppler techniques, which is standard for the new ASAs. Instrumental range is 245 nautical miles, so quite the reach. Of course, it's 360-degree coverage up to almost straight up. A plus 85-degree up angle. So it has a very, limited blind spot directly above the ship, which it doesn't need to look up there anyway, right? Especially if you have 2 of these side by side, then you have no blind spots. Let's see, the below deck weight is 4,000 kilograms. The whole system is 10,000 kilograms. Very, very heavy, and in use since 2014. This thing is proven it works. So good for India for figuring out digital ASA. They are a first world nation and first world Navy now. India deserves a lot of respect for what they've built here. Not just the entire ship, but the systems themselves are very good. All right, here's the Lanza that I was talking about. I have it on good authority that this thing is amazing. And so this is manufactured by the Inger company, multi-scenario, multi-threat adaptive radar. This thing can classify the contacts. That's one of the things that this thing can do, is it won't just tell you, hey, we got an airplane on this bearing and range and whatever. It'll tell you what the classification of the airplane based on the radar returns. That's how good this is. And it's accurate. It's not like, it's not going to tell you if it's a bomber or fighter. It's going to tell you it's the MiG-31, exactly what it is. It might give you the pilot social security number. It's pretty good. Anyway, so it's ECM resistant, and that's how they build a lot of these now, is that it can detect when it's being jammed, and it can frequency hop and do other techniques that are not public to try and get around that. It does have 360-degree azimuth. The coverage is, plus 40 degrees up. And once you get outside a couple nautical miles, and this thing has a 250 nautical mile range, it can pretty much cover the whole spectrum. It's really good. I would argue for classification anyway of targets, probably better than the ASA radar, the digital ASA. All right, so here's the hull-mounted sonar developed by DRDO. That's essentially India's digital or defense research and development. I forget what the organization, I think this is what the other stands for. Anyway, so medium frequency sonar, I'm surprised they have the values out, but they're saying it's 5 kilohertz to 8 kilohertz, which is right in range for what I would expect it to be. Has 8 trackers. That's not good, I'll be honest with you. And a max range is 14 kilometers, and that really does depend on water conditions, of course. I hate it whenever they add ranges, because I would assume that this would be the best range, and that is kind of an odd number to have as your max range, because usually max range modes are in even numbers, like 16 kilometers, 20 kilometers, and this one being 14.8 is definitely not true. But that's what they're putting out there as the public number. So I would assume that it's closer to 16 to 20 kilometers maximum range. It doesn't mean they'll even see anything out that far. That just means the button that they push, the mode that they're in, is 20 kilometer mode. Anyway, enough speculation for me. Let's try and stick to the facts. I'm just sharing my experiences with you here. Giving you my opinion, especially when it comes to sonar. I kind of know how those things work. Okay, so this is the electronic warfare suite. This thing is pretty advanced. India has really struggled with this because electronic warfare is hard, okay? It's not something you just do and do well, right? But they've come a long way with this, and I really think the Americans, and especially the Chinese, may be assisting them. But they do ESM in the B to K bands, those are radar bands, and they have countermeasures in the H to K bands. See LPI reception capability and high DF accuracy. DF means direction finding. So whenever they detect the radar on the horizon, they get a pretty narrow beam on it. In other words, instead of it being plus or minus 5 degrees, 090, they could say, hey, it's 090 plus or minus 1 degree, and shoot weapons down that way, radar, tracking, radar homing weapons, and you'll hit whatever radar that is, and that's kind of how you would employ something like that. They don't give us any real details as to its capability, and that's expected because nobody does. Electronic warfare is one of the most sensitive parts of any military. All right, here's the 76 Super Rapid Gun Mount, SRGM. Really good gun. can reach out and hit targets out to 16 kilometers, shoots 80 rounds, 120 rounds per minute. 80 rounds are in the mount, and then additional rounds would have to be pushed up from the battery below. 8 kilometers for the airburst round to shoot targets, and it weighs just under 8,000 kilograms. I'm really glad that they're adding the weights to these weapons now, just to give you an idea of how big and heavy these things are. And look at the turret beneath it. I love the picture on top there, where you can see the rotation mechanism that spins the turret around. And it's all, mechanically, and electromechanically aimed and stuff. There's no person in the turret anymore. The person is inside CIC, and he can take manual control of this, but oftentimes it's just radar guided. The computer, accounts for wind and humidity, and all these, environmental factors, and then aims the barrel to hit the target. All right, here's the BrahMos PJ-10. This thing was, I believed years ago, a pipe dream, but they actually built it and they've tested it. It actually works. Okay, so I've had to overcome my own bias of the Indian military in the past, because they've had some failures, but those were a long time ago, and they've come a long way in the past decade. So I'm here to give them some credit. And say that the BrahMos PJ-10 missile is an incredible weapon. And it was heavily influenced, if not engineered, by the Russians, and then provided to the Indians to build. The Indians will tell you that they did this all themselves, but we all know that the Russians and the Indians, in this case, on this program, worked closely together with each other. It is cold launched, which means it's just thumped out, and then the rocket motor kicks in and it goes 2.2 Mach downrange for about 158 nautical miles. It is ramjet liquid propellant and carries a 200 to 300 kilogram warhead, which is enough to do the job. It'll blow a big hole in a ship, or if it hits a building, it blows the building away. It's pretty cool. It does do terrain following radar and has an infrared seeker in the nose. So if for some reason it doesn't see the target, and with GPS or whatever, it can use the infrared to kind of fine tune the last few moments to make sure it hits the target if it needs to. Here's the Barak 8 SAM. This one was developed in conjunction with Israel, and Israel makes incredibly good weapon systems. This reminds me a lot of the Iron Dome surface-to-air interceptors. It looks a lot like it, and so this just might be the Indian version of Iron Dome. And if that's the case, this thing is awesome. All right, it's a two-way data link. It's got a radar active seeker as well as IR homing. It has a 100-kilometer max range. That's why I did not want to call this short range, right? It's just not the long range one that that's in the back. Like I said, they have different variants of the Barak system, and one of the big differences is some are longer range than others. All right, so it's got a 60-kilogram warhead, does Mach 2 flight. It's a 20-kilometer flight ceiling, which is enough to hit just about anything, short of the International Space Station, and a smokeless dual-purpose propulsion in service since 2015. And this is another one. This is a system that was languishing, and I think whenever they started working with the Israelis, I think that's what got the system off the ground. So again, overcoming my own bias, this is a good system now, and it's successfully been tested since 2015, some 8 years now at time of this recording, so it works. Okay, the AK-630, we should all be very familiar with this system. This is a Soviet Navy era weapon. It's reliable, it works, it's high rate of fire, it has multi-modes, it can be in anti-surface mode, shooting up, pirates off the coast of Somalia, as we've seen. And then, of course, its primary purpose is point defense against low-flying objects, whether it's a cruise missile incoming or a helicopter or even airplanes. If it gets close enough, it's going to hit it, because it puts out like 5,000 rounds per minute in this Gatling gun style multi-barrel high-volume system. It carries about 2,000 rounds in its magazine, and there's different variants of these. I've seen magazines that have 3,000 rounds, but we'll go with the Indian version. Only has 2,000 rounds. The point is, these rounds are 30 millimeter rounds. The first one that hits your ship is going to put a nice hole in it, and they're shooting, thousands of rounds a minute at you. So it's not going to take all 2,000 to tear up your little pirate boat. All right, here's the torpedo launch. You can see they're pneumatically launched. They have the lightweight torpedo and the heavyweight torpedo. Here, this IOC'd in 2016. It is a 53 centimeter weapon, which, you know, it's definitely, the diameter would classify it as a heavyweight torpedo, and it can do up to 40 knots. If it's a heavyweight torpedo, it probably does more than 40 knots. These are just public numbers. I'm not even going to guess at the actual speed. Just know that I believe it's higher than that. The max range is 20 kilometers. That checks. And so does the 600 kilometer max depth. I think they mean 600 meters there. But still, you kind of get the idea. We're just giving you the public numbers here. And it's electrical driven, active passive homing. The picture on the right is a lightweight torpedo. And that's typically 40 centimeters, or 343 millimeters. But just know that they claim that they can shoot the heavyweight one, and the picture on the left is certainly a heavyweight torpedo. So this is a new capability. Shooting one of those is going to it's going to run for a long time. It has a lot of fuel. So, and then it also has a larger warhead, of course, being a heavyweight torpedo. All right, here's the RBU-6000 ASW rockets made in Russia. I see it in 1982. Short-range anti-submarine warfare weapon. This weapon is capable. I mean, if your submarine gets 6,000 meters away from the thing and they shoot at you, it's going to be a bad day for the submarine. I'll be honest with you. Now these new rockets do have new fuses where they don't have to actually hit the submarine. They can get close, magnetic detection, and explode. Some of the new variants can actually swim a short distance. So even if they don't land right on top of your submarine, once it's in the water and it's going down, it will do a quick search for any object and move or fall, if you will, in the direction of that object. And then the proximity fuse, if it gets close enough, will detonate. So it can be, it's more effective than it used to be, because they used to be dumbfire. And while they still are dumbfire, there are new variants that are not dumbfire. All right, let's talk about helicopters. They use the American helicopter, the Sea King 42. This thing is an old workhorse of the Navy, going all the way back to the 60s, 80s? Yeah, a long time ago. But the new one, and they do have some of these, is the MH-60R. Is an incredibly reliable helicopter. IOC'd in 2009 for the Indians. 140 knots operational speed, 13,000 feet service ceiling, operational range of 245 nautical miles, and has a long range surface search radar, the APS-147. I believe that can also do air search as well. But I know it's also used for targeting over the horizon contacts back to the ship. So this is part of the data link suite. On the American side, we call it Aegis because it kind of connects everything. But even for sonar systems, the new sonar systems are just considered a suite now. It's not just hull mounted and VDS. It's also a data linked to these mobile assets. So whenever they drop their AQS-22 dipping sonar into the water, it can push back that information back to the ship, and then they can take action from there. So really good stuff. Really, really capable. I would argue, as far as the ASW goes, this is its most capable asset. I understand the hull-mounted sonar is great and all, but really, these helicopters, if they find a submarine, it's really difficult for the submarine to get away from a helicopter, because the helicopter has the advantage of mobility and speed over the submarine that's trying to escape. The only advantage the submarine has, and this is assuming that it's nuclear, is endurance. Eventually, the helicopter's got to go back for gas. But they can have multiple helicopters, and that's what makes it so hard to get away. Anyway, without going too much into tactics, I would argue this is the most capable ASW sensor on board the ship. All right, final thoughts. Finally, I get to talk about my opinion. Wow, am I impressed with this ship? I really am. I need to, I have always had a kind of a negative attitude towards the Indian military, because they've made so many mistakes and they have so many designs that never actually come to fruition. But they actually built this one. There's, like I said, they've already launched 5 of a planned 7. So they're really going forward with this, and it's super capable. Like I said, it's arguably better than our new Constellation class. that's coming out, which is incredible. How is another Navy building a better frigate than we are right now, than the United States is? But that's what's happening here, is the Nilgiri-class is really impressive. And it's completely indigenous. Yeah, they did have help from certainly the Russians for that missile, the Chinese for the sensors, the Americans, of course, for the helicopters, and I believe some other things that may have contributed to their success. The point is, at the end of the day, they did it, and they deserve a lot of credit. And maybe they're turning their reputation around from my perspective. So this frigate's going to have deep strike capability with air defense capability. It's going to be a multi-role because it also does submarine warfare. It does everything well. You know, I guess the only way to make this ship better would be to give it more of what it already has. And the way they're doing that is by building more ships. So they also have diversity in the arsenal, very similar to the Americans' new approach. You know, we're getting away from the Ticonderoga arsenal ships that have over 100 VLS cells to 4 to 5 ships that have 30 VLS cells. And that way you still have the same over 100 VLSs, but now it's distributed amongst the fleet. So whenever you lose a ship, which inevitably is going to happen, you don't lose your power to fight back. And this is what they're doing here too. So the main propulsion system is CODAG, incorporates 2 gas turbines, 2 diesel engines. And I'm telling you guys right now, based on the weight of this ship, it can go much faster than 28 knots. But just remember, 28 knots is the public number. And then Project 17 Alpha frigates will be capable of escorting the Indian aircraft carriers, yes, which they are building a second aircraft carrier. They are using the old design. It's essentially a variant of the Kuznetsov, I believe, which is not necessarily the best, but it's what they're going with. So this ship will be a great escort for it, for sure. And I look forward to see what other Indian ships come out. We're going to, because I'm so impressed with this one, we're going to see what other projects they have going forward. We may do more lectures on the Indian Navy than I had planned. But this ship had caught my attention, and the more I looked into it, the more I realized this thing is quite capable. And they should be proud of what they built. All right. Well, that's it for the Nilgiri ship brief. Thank you, everybody, for your support, and we'll see you in the next one. Have a great day, everybody.